Hello to all of you. I hope you are having a wonderful day. My name is Mary Catherine Lisinski, and I am a licensed professional counselor. I'll have my contact information in the comments of this post, and that way I can just jump right in. Today, I am going to be sharing with you some communication skills. Now, there are, of course, many skills that we can learn to improve our communication, and I believe that one of the most helpful ones is to learn how to notice our emotions, to be aware of what we are feeling, and then to be able to calm ourselves down. And I've actually already made a video that discusses how we do that and the whys behind the hows and all of that. It's actually just a 7-minute video. I have it on my YouTube channel, which is LifeWalk Professional Counseling. I'll also see if I can put a link to that specific video in the comments, but I encourage you to watch that as I consider that maybe to be one of the most helpful, but I wanted to add some different ones in today's video. So what I can talk about today is one thing that we need to realize is how much control we have over a situation versus how much influence we have. We, of course, do not have control over other people and how they communicate with us, okay? But we do have influence, and maybe more influence than we actually realize. And so some of these skills, as we go through, you'll realize they are actually to help influence the other people. But first of all, to realize, hey, we have more control over our own emotions and our own communication skills, and that is, of course, number one. We want to learn how to be able to respond in a healthy way instead of quickly reacting in a way that we later regret. And so learning that difference between reacting versus responding, we want to respond in a healthy way. Now, one way I've heard it put when we talk about how we communicate with other people is that we want to treat our family and friends at least with the stranger standard. Now, what is the stranger standard? Well, think about this. When you meet a stranger in the grocery store, in a parking lot, in an elevator, when you have some short communication, short time with someone you've never met, pretty much all of us tend to be polite, friendly, nice. We're not rude, we're not disrespectful, we're not going to ignore them or put them down, things like that. We're nice to strangers. But what about our families? Sometimes we treat our families worse than that, don't we? Family, friends, coworkers, things like that. We tend to get snappy, we argue, we can say disrespectful things, we can walk off and ignore them. So that's another perspective shift, to just think about, can I at least treat the people I'm close to at least with the stranger standard? And then go from there. I feel like so many things that we can learn are a perspective shift first, and then secondly, the skills that we can actually apply. And so going along with that, let's say you're thinking about a specific person that you tend to have conflict with, or you tend to criticize or complain, things like that. Now think about, how often do you compliment them? How often do you say nice things? How often do you start good conversations with them? We want to have actually way more times of good communication, compliments, kind words than we have at all thinking about complaints or criticisms or arguments and saying, I need to not just balance this out, but have the good communication be way higher. So we have to be purposeful in those times. Now, when it comes to thinking about a specific conversation, let's say you want to convince someone to do something with you that you think at first, they're not going to want to do this. How do I convince them of my way? We tend to start thinking, just how do I list out why I want this, or why it's good for me, or here are all the reasons about me, right? But you want to start thinking about, how would this other person see this activity as a benefit, or see this opinion as a good thing? How will they receive it when I present it? And think about, how do I present it in a way that is appealing to them, and not just all about, well, here's how I feel, or here's how I want, right? Now, another part to this would be, what time and place is better for this person? If I know I'm going to need to talk to someone about a topic that is going to be emotionally charged, just go ahead and ask them, hey, is there a certain day of the week that's better for you to talk about important issues, or a certain time of day, either right after work or after supper, or even, where, do you want to talk about it at the kitchen table? Do you want to talk about it in the living room? And see, because we don't, I know for myself, where are my comfort zones? What are my times when I'm most relaxed, when I'm most ready to be able to talk through important issues? And you want to know that for the other person as well. That shows respect and kindness. So go ahead and ask. And I found that to be helpful. Now, another skill would be to, when you realize that you're in the middle of a conversation and you start to feel yourself getting angry or anxious or sad, or just having your emotions rise up, so to speak, you want to be able to say, hey, you know what? I need to take a minute here. I need to pause and take a break. Can we come back? Now, the most important part of this is, can we come back? Because I know this is an important issue to us, and we can't just drop it. So many people, when they get to that heated part, they just drop it and ignore and go away. And you're like, when are we going to finish talking about this? But saying, I need a break, whether it would be, a 5-minute break, that may be all you need to calm yourself down. You might need a 30-minute break. You might need a 5-hour break. You may need a break until the next day. Whatever amount of break you think that the two of you need, go ahead and say, let's plan for this, but we need to talk when we are feeling more calm, more relaxed, because that's how you are able to communicate more effectively. Now, one thing that you can do, either when you're taking this break, or even better, before you even start the conversation to begin with, is to write out what you are wanting to communicate. Now, this has several benefits. Number one, if you have it written out, you can write out, okay, here are the 3 reasons why I feel this way, or why I want this to be the way that we do things. Because when we get into a conversation back and forth, many times we forget one of our important points, and it's just not there. And so writing it out. Also, this goes back to being able to think out specifically, how will the other person receive this? Can I word it in my writing in a way that I think that they will be more likely to receive? Because if we come at them in an attacking way, or just, this is what I want, if they feel at all attacked or like they are not being listened to, they're going to go on the defense, right? And someone on the defense is not very likely to come across and to come towards your way of thinking, right? And so we want to be sure to listen to them and say, I have 3 points I'd like to make about this, and then I want to hear your points as well. But making sure and thinking about, I don't want this other person to feel attacked, because if they feel attacked, they're going to just shut off and not be at all interested in coming around to my way of thinking. Now, as long as I'm talking about writing, I found it very helpful to write out a pro and con list. When you're trying to make a decision, either by yourself or with another person, writing down a pro and con list is excellent. You can have in your mind pros and cons, and going back and forth, and you're trying to make this decision, but it just tends to keep swirling around in there, and it never settles down like we start hoping that it will just magically settle down one day. Many times it doesn't, and so writing out helps you to see, helps your mind to be calm and settled enough so that you can see, here's actually the number of pros and the number of cons, and then to share that, when you're discussing with another person, saying, well, what's your pro and con list? And let's compare them and combine them and see what happens here. Now, I will say this. Some of the skills that I've shared and that I'm about to share, they sound simple. They sound like, oh, I shouldn't have to do that. I'm a grown person. Why do I have to do these things that kind of feel silly? But really, they really work. I promise you. And that's why I'm sharing them. And to say, you know what? If I believe that communication is important for me, for my relationships with the people that I'm close to, with my coworkers, with my neighbors, that means it's worth putting extra effort into. When something is important, we put extra effort into it. And so I'm hoping that you will be able to use some of these. Now, going back to when you're actually talking to someone, when we get into a more of a heated argument and we're trying to calm ourselves down, we tend to say things like, "You make me so angry," right? And we project onto the other person. We blame the other person for our emotions. And that, first of all, it doesn't help them to be more likely to come to your side, right? Now, of course, we want to be able to express our feelings. Sometimes we really need to let the other person know, hey, this is what I'm feeling inside in this moment. But there's a healthy way to do that. So instead of saying something like, "You make me so angry," how to phrase it is, when you blank, when you say a certain thing or when you do a certain thing, I feel angry or sad or upset or whatever the feeling word is. So again, that format of saying, when you blank, I feel blank, that's much more helpful than to be, again, accusatory towards them, because here's something else that is important to realize. When we're having a conversation and we have a certain emotion come up, let's say anger, that first, very first minute or so of reaction would be a natural reaction. If they're saying something that is disrespectful towards you, you're going to feel a little bit angry at first. Now, the point after that, though, is that we get to choose whether we stay angry, whether we stay upset. We have that control. As we learn emotional skills, we learn that our emotional state, our responses are under our control. So when we try to blame someone else, that's really not right and not productive. But again, sharing our feelings can be important so that they know how their words and their actions affect us. So that phrase of, when you blank, I feel blank, is a great way to help the communication to keep going. Now, along with how we talk to other people, how we talk to ourselves is very important. If I think, to myself, I'm just a communication failure, I can't communicate, it always ends in arguments, I mess up all the time. If I were to say things like that to myself, that just drags me down, right? And so we tend to have a lot more self-talk, thoughts within our own mind, than we talk and have verbal conversations with other people. So saying, I need to improve my own communication with my own self. I need to watch how I talk to myself. That is another way that we can improve communication, because how we feel about ourselves affects how we are able to communicate with others and how we are able to improve our skills. Now, another thing to watch out for is, many times in conversations we'll be like, "You always mess this up," or "You always forget that," right? Or to say, "You never remember this or that." So the key words in there to watch out for is when we use words like always and never, many times those aren't exactly true, right? And when we overgeneralize like that, it's not helpful to the situation, to trying to keep things calm. So watch out for when you use those words always and never, and see if you can say things like, "Sometimes when this happens, you have this reaction and such," right? And so softening things that make it more towards reality can be very helpful. So watch out for those words. So what I've been talking about today with communication skills, I would put communication skills under a broader umbrella of what I would call emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is something that is great that we can improve. We don't have to stay stuck in poor communication habits. We don't have to stay stuck in not knowing how to handle our feelings. And so, of course, even as adults, we can learn these skills, which is great, adults, teenagers, and children. And I wanted to point out one thing that can be helpful to children is that as children are learning and growing, they are learning vocabulary words, right? And so we want to make sure that children are learning feeling words in their vocabulary. And I have something neat to show you. This is called a feeling wheel. I'm going to make sure you can see it pretty well there. And it basically just has a lot of feelings listed and how they relate to each other. And so if you have children, teaching them specific feeling words can be very helpful in helping them to know, hey, I can communicate exactly how I'm feeling here. If you Google feeling wheel, or you can just even Google list of emotions, and try to learn a few of those every day and teach them to your children. That can really help children to be able to communicate and to not get as frustrated when they feel like they can't communicate specifically enough. Now, another part of good communication, which is kind of a general background skill, is that we need to get enough sleep. Everybody knows that when you don't have enough sleep, you get grouchy, right? And we tend to be snappy and grouchy and just in a bad mood. So I'm going to give you some tips about that. First of all, in order to know whether you get enough sleep or not, is to say, okay, usually when I wake up, do I wake up feeling rested, ready to take on the day, have some energy, feel somewhat mentally alert? I know that some of us take a little bit to wake up in the mornings, but generally pretty quickly, do you feel like, yeah, I'm ready to go today? And if you don't feel that way on a regular basis, it means you're not getting enough sleep. So there are several things that can help with this, and this is not in any particular order, but one thing that is mentioned is that many times we are looking at screens at night, our phones, computers, tablets, whatever, and they emit, usually from the background, a blue light. It is the background sort of color, and that specific type of light disrupts our body's ability to start producing melatonin, which helps us to go to sleep at night. And so there are settings on computers, and I believe on cell phones, where you can set it to more of the yellow background instead of a blue background coming through. And that is healthier for your body's ability to produce that melatonin to help you to fall to sleep at night. And so especially in the afternoons and evenings, to either limit screen time or have that on the yellow background can be helpful. Another thing is to watch your caffeine consumption, and don't drink caffeine in the late afternoons and evenings, because that is going to keep your brain awake and not able to fall asleep as well. Another skill to try to use is to go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time every day. And that is one that can be hard for me. But when we have our body in a routine and in a schedule as far as sleeping, by the time we are actually getting in bed that evening, it's like, okay, ready to go to sleep now. This is our sleep time. So again, going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time every day is helpful. And of course, getting a nice amount of exercise during the day helps your body to be tired enough to fall asleep. And so I hope that these suggestions and skills have been helpful to you. Again, my contact information and the link to that video will be in these comments. I hope you have a wonderful day.